The intercom light was blinking red when I walked past Janet's desk that Friday afternoon. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Why would I? I had no idea that tiny red light was about to save my life. David Hoffman called me into his office at 4:45 p.m. The timing should have been my first warning. Everyone else had already left for the weekend. The fluorescent lights in the hallway buzzed overhead as I walked toward his corner office, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Through the glass walls, I could see him sitting behind his massive oak desk, his face unreadable. He gestured for me to come in. I opened the door, and then I heard it. The soft click of the lock turning behind me. I'm 32 years old. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've worked as a senior accountant at Hoffman Industries for 6 years. I'd climbed from an entry-level position to managing a team of 5 people. I was good at my job. Really good. Maybe that's why David chose me. Or maybe it was because he knew I was a single mom with a 4-year-old daughter and $70,000 in student loan debt. Someone who couldn't afford to walk away. He told me to sit down. His voice was calm, almost friendly. That made it worse somehow. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk and noticed he'd closed the blinds. The glass walls that usually made his office visible to the entire floor were now covered. We were completely hidden from view. David opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it across the desk toward me. Inside were financial documents, invoices, transfer receipts, accounting ledgers. I recognized them immediately because I'd worked on some of these accounts. But the numbers were wrong. They'd been changed, inflated. Money that should have gone to vendors had been rerouted. Hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted to offshore accounts I'd never seen before. He said, "I need you to sign these. Your signature validates the transfers, makes everything look legitimate." I just stared at him. I asked what he was talking about. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that made my stomach drop. He said, "You're going to help me move some money around. Nothing complicated. Just your signature on a few documents. Makes it look like the senior accounting team approved everything." I felt my hands start to shake. I said, "This is fraud." He leaned back in his chair and said, "No, Sarah. This is business, and you're going to be part of it." I told him no. Just flat out no. I stood up to leave. That's when everything changed. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't have to. He said, "Sit down, Sarah." "We're not finished." Something in his tone made me freeze. He said, "You have a daughter, Emma. She goes to Riverside Elementary, gets picked up every day at 3:15 by your mother." He let that hang in the air. I felt ice water run through my veins. He continued, "You have $73,000 in student loans, a mortgage you're barely keeping up with. Your car is 10 years old and needs a new transmission. You're living paycheck to paycheck, and I can make all of that so much worse." I asked him what he meant. He opened another folder. This one had papers with my name on them. Forged documents showing I'd been embezzling from the company for months. False invoices, fake vendor accounts, all pointing back to me. He said, "If you don't sign what I'm asking you to sign, these documents go to the FBI on Monday morning. You'll be arrested, charged with wire fraud and embezzlement. You'll lose your daughter, your house, everything. You'll go to prison. Or you can sign 3 pieces of paper and walk out of here with a $50,000 bonus in your account by Monday. Your choice." My mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. I'd worked so hard to build a clean life for Emma and me. I'd done everything right. And now this man was sitting across from me, threatening to destroy it all. I asked him why. Why me? He said, "Because you're smart enough to make this look legitimate and desperate enough not to ask too many questions. Plus, if this ever comes back on me, I need someone to take the fall. That someone is you. Unless you cooperate." What David didn't know was that Janet Martinez, his executive secretary for 12 years, had turned on the intercom system the moment she saw him call me in and lock the door. She'd been sitting at her desk in the outer office with her phone recording every single word. The intercom had a feature most people didn't know about. It could be activated remotely. And Janet had activated it because she'd been waiting for this moment for 2 years. I sat in that office for 40 minutes while David systematically destroyed any illusion I had about the company I worked for. He told me about the shell corporations, the fake vendors, The money being funneled to accounts in the Cayman Islands. He said I wasn't the first person he'd pressured into helping him. There were 3 others before me. All of them had signed. All of them were now complicit. All of them were trapped just like I was about to be. He said, "You think you're special, Sarah? You think you can say no? Nobody says no. Not when I have everything I need to destroy them." He pushed the papers toward me again. Told me to sign. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I thought about Emma, about losing her, about prison, about my mother having to raise my daughter while I sat in a cell. I put the pen to paper. And then I stopped. I looked up at David and said, "I can't do this. I'd rather lose everything than become what you are." His face changed. The fake friendliness disappeared. He said, "You're making a huge mistake." I said, "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." I stood up, walked to the door, tried the handle. It was still locked. I asked him to unlock it. He said, "You're not leaving until you sign." I said, "Then I guess I'm not leaving." We stared at each other for what felt like forever. Finally, he got up, walked over, and unlocked the door. As I opened it, he said, "You'll regret this. Monday morning, your life is over. I'll make sure of it." I walked out of his office on legs that felt like rubber. The hallway was empty. The lights had been dimmed for the weekend. I made it to the elevator and pressed the button. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I got in. The doors closed, and I completely fell apart. I sobbed the entire way down to the parking garage. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, unable to drive. I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to protect Emma, how I was going to fight someone with that much power and that much evidence against me. I was still sitting there when someone knocked on my window. I jumped. It was Janet. She was holding a folder and had her phone in her other hand. She said, "We need to talk, right now." I got out of the car. She looked around the parking garage to make sure we were alone. Then she said, "I heard everything. I recorded it all. Every word, every threat." She showed me her phone. The recording was 43 minutes long. She said, "He did the same thing to me 2 years ago. Threatened my family. Threatened to have me arrested. I signed his papers because I was too scared not to. And I've regretted it every single day since." She opened the folder. Inside were documents, screenshots, emails, bank records. She said, "I've been investigating him for 2 years, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. I know about the other 3 people he coerced. I know about the offshore accounts. I know everything. But I needed one more piece. I needed him on record threatening someone, making it clear this wasn't just creative accounting. This was criminal coercion. And you just gave me that." I asked her why. Why help me? Why risk everything? She said, "Because he destroyed my career. I used to be a financial analyst. I had a degree from Cornell. I was going places. Then he cornered me in that same office, locked that same door, and turned me into an accomplice. I took a plea deal to avoid prison. Agreed to work as his secretary so he could keep an eye on me, make sure I never talked. But I've been planning this for 2 years, documenting everything. And now I finally have enough to bury him." She told me there were 3 other victims. Marcus Chen, who'd been the head of procurement. David had forced him to approve fake vendor contracts. Marcus was now working at a car wash because his reputation had been destroyed. Jennifer Walsh, who'd been in legal. David had made her notarize documents she knew were fraudulent. She'd lost her law license. And Robert Hayes, who'd been in operations. David had threatened to report him to immigration unless he helped move stolen equipment to dummy warehouses. Robert had left the state entirely. Janet said, "All of them signed under duress. All of them have been living in fear for years. But with this recording and the evidence I've compiled, we can take him down. All of us together." I asked what she needed from me. She said, "Monday morning, we're going to walk into corporate headquarters. We're going to meet with the general counsel and the head of internal audit. We're going to hand them everything. And then we're going to watch David Hoffman get escorted out of this building in handcuffs." That weekend was the longest of my life. I barely slept. Every time my phone rang, I thought it was David calling to threaten me again. Or the police coming to arrest me. Janet had given me copies of everything she'd compiled. I spent Saturday and Sunday going through it all. The evidence was overwhelming. Shell corporations registered in Delaware and Nevada, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, over $15 million diverted from company funds over a 6-year period, invoices for services never rendered, equipment purchases that never arrived, consulting fees paid to companies that didn't exist, and the threats. Oh God, the threats. Janet had recorded 3 other conversations over the past year. Different employees called into David's office. The same locked door. The same pattern. Presents them with evidence they've been involved in fraud. Threatens their families. Offers them money to stay quiet. Forces them to sign more documents that make them more complicit. It was a system. A well-oiled machine of coercion and control. Monday morning at 8 a.m., we met in the parking lot. All 5 of us. Me, Janet, Marcus, Jennifer, and Robert. We'd never met before, but we all knew each other's stories now. We all knew what David had done to us. Marcus looked hollow. He'd lost 40 pounds since I'd last seen him. Jennifer had dark circles under her eyes. Robert could barely make eye contact. We were a group of broken people held together by shared trauma and the desperate hope that this might actually work. We walked into the building together, took the elevator to the executive floor. Janet had arranged a meeting with Gregory Palmer, the general counsel, and Susan Chen, the head of internal audit. They were waiting for us in a conference room. Janet laid out everything: the recordings, the documents, the offshore accounts, the falsified invoices, the threats, the pattern of coercion stretching back years. Gregory's face went white. Susan started taking notes immediately. They asked questions. We answered. 2 hours later, they called corporate security. David was in his office when they arrived. Janet told me later that he looked shocked. Actually shocked. Like he couldn't believe this was happening. They escorted him out of the building with his hands behind his back. Not handcuffs yet, but close. Corporate lawyers met him in the parking garage, informed him he was suspended pending investigation. Took his keys, his laptop, his phone, everything. He kept saying there'd been a misunderstanding, that he could explain. Nobody listened. The investigation took 3 weeks. Federal auditors came in. The FBI got involved. Turned out David's fraud went even deeper than Janet had discovered. $23 million total. Multiple victims beyond the 5 of us. Accounts in 6 different countries. He'd been running this scheme for 8 years, building himself a fortress of stolen money while using terrified employees as human shields. He'd been so careful, so meticulous. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Janet was too broken to fight back. He'd underestimated what a person can accomplish when they've spent 2 years planning their revenge. David was arrested 4 weeks after our meeting, charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and witness tampering. The FBI found the forged documents he'd created with my name on them, the fake paper trail designed to frame me if anything went wrong. They found similar documents for Marcus, Jennifer, and Robert. Insurance policies, he'd called them. Ways to make sure we'd never talk. Every single one of those documents became evidence of criminal coercion. The trial lasted 6 months. All 5 of us testified, stood up in federal court and told our stories, described the locked door, the threats, the fear. David's lawyers tried to paint us as willing participants, tried to say we'd benefited financially. But Janet's recordings destroyed that defense. You could hear it in David's voice. The calculation, the cruelty, the way he'd systematically destroyed people's lives to protect his own crimes. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, found him guilty on all counts. He got 28 years, no possibility of parole for at least 15. The judge said David had betrayed the trust of his employees and his company, had used his position of power to coerce vulnerable people into criminal activity, had shown no remorse whatsoever. The sentence reflected the severity and premeditation of his crimes. When they took him away, he looked at Janet, just for a second. She stared right back, didn't flinch, didn't look away. She'd waited 2 years for that moment, and she wasn't going to miss a second of it. The company settled with all of us. The amounts varied based on what we'd been through. I got $350,000. Marcus got $400,000. Jennifer got $500,000 because she'd lost her law license. Robert got $200,000. And Janet got $1.2 million. Plus, they paid for her to finish her master's degree, helped her get her financial analyst license back. Last I heard, she's working as a consultant now, making more money than David ever paid her, living her life on her own terms. As for me, I paid off my student loans, put a down payment on a real house for Emma and me, one with a backyard and good schools nearby, set up a college fund for my daughter, went to therapy twice a week for a year to process everything that had happened, started sleeping through the night again. Emma asked me once why we moved, why everything changed. I told her that sometimes grown-ups make hard choices to protect the people they love, that standing up to bad people is scary but necessary, that she should never let anyone make her do something she knows is wrong, no matter how much they threaten her. She's 8 now, smart as hell, fearless in ways I never was at her age. Sometimes I think about that Friday afternoon, about the moment I put the pen to paper and then couldn't go through with it. I think about how different my life would be if I'd signed those documents, if I'd become complicit in David's crimes, if I'd spent the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day it all came crashing down. I made the right choice. The hard choice, but the right one. And Janet, God, Janet is my hero. She spent 2 years in hell, planning and documenting and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She could have walked away, could have taken her settlement and disappeared. Instead, she made sure David would never hurt anyone else, made sure we all got justice, made sure the truth came out. The intercom light was blinking red that day. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but it meant someone was watching. Someone was listening. Someone cared enough to gather evidence and build a case and wait for exactly the right moment to act. Today, I work for a nonprofit that helps victims of workplace coercion. I've helped 37 people in the past 3 years. People who've been threatened by bosses, coerced into illegal activities, trapped by fear and debt and desperation. I tell them Janet's story. I tell them mine. I tell them that speaking up is terrifying but possible, that there are people who will believe them, that evidence matters, that justice, while slow and imperfect, does sometimes arrive for those brave enough to pursue it. The question I get asked most is whether I'd do it again, if I'd make the same choice knowing how hard the next year would be. The investigation, the trial, the testimony, the nightmares, the therapy. And I always say yes, because the alternative was becoming someone I couldn't live with. The alternative was teaching my daughter that survival means compromising your integrity, that fear is stronger than courage, that powerful people always win. And I refuse to teach her those lessons. I refuse to live in a world where those lessons are true. Some doors get locked to trap you, but sometimes you walk out anyway, even when you're terrified, even when the cost seems too high. Because staying in that room, signing those papers, becoming complicit in someone else's crimes, that's the real trap. That's the door that never opens again.